The cowboy who never asked for love, until the woman next door changed his heart. The chicken that started a love story. Montana Territory, 1881. The wind moved softly across the endless golden fields, carrying the smell of dry grass, horses, and old wooden fences that had stood for decades against the wild storms of the West. Jack Calloway was a man who believed in keeping things simple. He owned a small ranch far away from the noisy towns, lived alone, worked from sunrise until sunset, and trusted only two things in life: his horse and his own hands. People in the nearby town called him the quiet cowboy. Not because he was rude. Not because he hated people. But because Jack had learned a long time ago that silence was easier than explaining a heart that had been broken. 5 years earlier, he had lost everything he thought mattered. The woman he planned to marry left town without a goodbye, choosing a richer man who promised her a better life. Since then, Jack had built walls around himself stronger than any fence on his ranch. Love was no longer something he searched for. Love was just another problem he didn't want. Until the day a chicken crossed his fence. Again, Jack stepped outside his cabin with his coffee in hand and stared at the little brown hen standing proudly in the middle of his land. He narrowed his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." The chicken looked at him like it owned the place. Jack walked closer. 3 times this week. 3 times. The chicken simply walked away. Jack sighed. "Even your owner has more sense than you." Then he looked toward the neighboring ranch. That was where the trouble always came from. May Whitfield, his new neighbor. A woman who had arrived in Montana only a few months earlier with her father's old wagon, a small farm, and a personality far too cheerful for Jack's liking. She was different from the people he knew. She laughed loudly. She spoke her mind. And worst of all, she never seemed intimidated by him. Jack walked toward the fence carrying the chicken. May. A few seconds later, a woman appeared near the barn. She wore a simple blue dress with an apron around her waist. Her blonde hair moved in the morning breeze as she looked toward him. "What happened now, Mr. Calloway?" Jack held up the chicken. "Your bird broke the law again." May looked at the chicken. Then at Jack. Then she smiled. "Are you seriously accusing a chicken of being a criminal?" Jack crossed his arms. "It entered my property." May walked closer. Maybe it was looking for better company. Jack tried not to smile. But for a second, he almost did. "Almost. That chicken has crossed my fence 3 times. May nodded seriously. "I see. Good. So the chicken is officially your enemy." Jack looked confused. "What?" May picked up the chicken. "Because from what I can see, you're arguing with a bird." For the first time in years, Jack didn't know what to say. May smiled. "You know, most men in Montana fight wolves, storms, and outlaws." She looked at the chicken. "You fight Henrietta." Jack stared. "You named it." "Of course. It's a chicken. She has feelings." Jack shook his head. "You're impossible." May smiled. "And you're lonely." The words hit him harder than he expected. His smile disappeared. May noticed. For a moment, the playful woman became quiet. "I didn't mean." Jack stepped back. "Forget it." He turned around and started walking away. But May called after him. "Jack." He stopped. Nobody called him by his first name. Not anymore. He slowly turned. May looked at him. "You don't have to be angry at everything just because something hurt you once." Jack stared at her. She didn't know his story. She didn't know what she was saying. Or maybe she knew more than he wanted to admit. Jack walked away, without answering. But that night, sitting alone beside the fireplace, he thought about her words. "You don't have to be angry at everything." For the first time in years, someone had looked past the cowboy everyone feared. Someone had seen the man underneath. And Jack hated that, because May Whitfield was becoming a problem. A bigger problem than any chicken. Because every time he saw her smile, his lonely heart remembered what it felt like to hope. The woman who wasn't afraid of the cowboy. The next morning, Jack Calloway woke before sunrise like he always did. The ranch was quiet. The kind of quiet he had spent years convincing himself he wanted. He walked outside, fed his horses, checked the fences, and started another ordinary day. But something was different. For some reason, he found himself looking toward May Whitfield's ranch. He hated that. He hated that he was curious. He hated that he wanted to know if she was outside, if she was laughing, if that impossible chicken had escaped again. "Get a hold of yourself, Jack," he muttered. "You're thinking about a woman because of a chicken." He shook his head and continued repairing the fence. But then he heard it. A loud voice coming from the other side of the field. Jack. He looked up. There she was. May. Running toward him. Her dress was covered with dirt, and her hair was messy from working. Jack immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? May stopped near the fence, trying to catch her breath. It's my barn. Jack frowned. What about it? The roof is damaged. The storm last night made it worse. Jack looked toward her property. The old barn was leaning slightly. It could collapse. I know. Then why are you standing here? May crossed her arms. Because I was hoping my neighbor, who claims to be the best rancher in Montana, might know how to fix it. Jack raised an eyebrow. You came here to insult me? No. She smiled. I came here because I know you're the only person who can help. That caught him off guard. Jack wasn't used to people needing him. Most people only came to him when they wanted something. But May wasn't asking like everyone else. She wasn't pretending. She actually trusted him. I'll look at it. May smiled. Thank you. Jack walked toward the barn. A few minutes later, he was climbing onto the roof while May watched from below. You always do everything yourself? She asked. Jack didn't look down. Yes. That sounds exhausting. It's called surviving. May became quiet. She looked at him carefully. You really believe that's all life is? Jack stopped working. What? Surviving. She looked around at the empty fields. You have this beautiful ranch. You have land, animals, a home. Then she looked back at him. But you act like you're still fighting a war nobody else can see. Jack slowly climbed down. You don't know me. May nodded. You're right. She paused. But I know loneliness when I see it. Those words stayed between them. The same feeling. The same hidden pain. Jack looked away. You talk too much. May smiled. And you don't talk enough. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then suddenly, the barn door opened. Henrietta the chicken walked out. Jack stared. May covered her mouth trying not to laugh. You have got to be kidding me. The chicken walked straight toward Jack. May laughed. A real laugh. The kind Jack hadn't heard in his own life for years. And before he could stop himself. Jack smiled. Just a little. But May noticed. Her laughter slowed. Was that a smile? Jack immediately looked serious. No, it was. No, it wasn't. Jack Calloway smiled. You imagined it. May stepped closer. I knew there was a human under all that cowboy anger. Jack shook his head. You're trouble. May looked at him. Maybe. Then, she smiled. But you don't seem to mind. Jack didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't. Later that afternoon, Jack returned home. But something bothered him. Not a problem with the ranch. Not the weather. Not the animals. It was May. The way she talked. The way she laughed. The way she saw something in him that even he had forgotten existed. That evening, while Jack sat outside his cabin, he noticed something near his fence. A small basket. Inside was fresh bread and a note. He picked it up. The note said, "Thank you for fixing the barn. And for not sending Henrietta back immediately. May." Jack looked at the chicken standing nearby. You've caused enough trouble. The chicken walked away. Jack almost laughed. Almost. But then he looked toward May's ranch. A small light was glowing inside her window. And for the first time in a very long time, his ranch didn't feel quite so empty. The storm that brought them closer. For the next few days, Jack Calloway tried his best to return to his old routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. No distractions. That was how he lived. But now there was one problem. May Whitfield. Every morning, he found himself looking toward her ranch. Sometimes he saw her feeding the animals. Sometimes he saw her fixing fences with more confidence than most men he knew. And sometimes, he saw her laughing. That laugh bothered him, because it reminded him that life was supposed to be more than just surviving. One afternoon, Jack rode into town to buy supplies. The small Montana town was busy as always. People walked between wooden buildings, horses stood tied near the streets, and the sound of conversation filled the air. As Jack walked toward the store, he heard someone talking. Is that the woman who bought the Whitfield farm? Jack stopped. Two men were standing near the saloon. Yeah, one of them said. Poor woman. That land is too much for her. Jack narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? The men looked at him. One of them laughed. Relax, Calloway. We're just saying she won't last. Jack stepped closer. She's doing fine. The man raised an eyebrow. You defending her now? Jack said nothing, because he didn't know the answer. But he knew one thing. He didn't like hearing anyone talk about May like she was weak. She's stronger than most men around here. The men laughed. But Jack walked away. Later that evening, dark clouds covered the sky. A storm was coming. A dangerous one. Jack looked toward May's ranch. Something felt wrong. He knew she was stubborn enough to ignore bad weather. And he was right. When the first drops of rain started falling, Jack saw a light moving near her barn. May. Outside. During a storm, Jack immediately grabbed his coat and rode toward her property. When he arrived, he saw May struggling with a broken fence. May. She turned around. Jack, what are you doing out here? Fixing the fence before the animals escape. Lightning flashed across the sky. Jack jumped off his horse. You could get hurt. I can handle myself. I know you can. He looked at her. But you don't have to handle everything alone. The words surprised both of them. May stared at him. For a moment, the storm was the only sound around them. Then another strong wind hit. The barn door suddenly broke open. The horses became restless. Jack ran inside. May followed. Together, they worked through the storm. Jack secured the doors. May calmed the animals. They moved like they had done it 100 times before. When the storm finally began to slow, they stood inside the barn, soaked from the rain. May laughed softly. What? Jack asked. She looked at him. I was just thinking. About what? That the most serious man in Montana is standing in a barn covered in mud because of my chicken. Jack looked at her. Then he smiled. A real smile this time. May noticed immediately. There it is again. What? That smile. Jack looked away. You talk too much. And you smile too little. For a moment, they were quiet. Then May said softly, thank you, Jack. He looked at her. For what? For showing up. Those 3 words hit him harder than he expected. Because nobody had ever said that to him. Nobody had ever noticed. Jack looked down. I was just helping. May shook her head. No. She stepped closer. You came because you cared. Jack wanted to deny it. He wanted to say she was wrong. But he couldn't. Because she was right. The next morning, the whole town heard about how Jack Calloway spent the night helping May during the storm. And people started talking. The lonely cowboy who never smiled was smiling again. But Jack didn't care about the rumors. Because when he returned home that morning, he found something waiting near his door. A small wooden box. Inside was a hand-sewn scarf. And a note. For the cowboy who keeps pretending he doesn't have a heart. May. Jack held the scarf in his hands. For years, he had believed love was something that only brought pain. But now, a woman with a stubborn chicken had walked into his life. And somehow, she was breaking down every wall he had built. The secret behind the lonely cowboy. After the storm, something changed between Jack Calloway and May Whitfield. They still argued. They still teased each other. And Henrietta the chicken still crossed the fence whenever she wanted. But now, there was something else. Something neither of them talked about. A feeling. Jack noticed it every morning when he looked toward May's ranch. And May noticed it every evening when Jack found some reason to pass by her property. A broken fence. A heavy box. A horse that needed checking. They both knew the truth. Jack wasn't just helping anymore. He was finding reasons to see her. One afternoon, May was planting flowers near her cabin when Jack rode up. She looked up and smiled. Let me guess. Jack got off his horse. What? You came to check if my chicken was planning another crime. Jack looked around. Where is she? May laughed. You're actually worried about her now. No. Yes, you are. Jack shook his head. She's dangerous. May smiled. You like her. I tolerate her. You like me too. Jack froze. May raised an eyebrow. What? You heard me. Jack looked away. You're too confident. No. She smiled. I'm just observant. Before Jack could answer, they heard horses approaching. A stranger entered the property. A tall man wearing an expensive coat and a confident smile. Jack immediately became serious. The man looked at May. Well, May Whitfield. May's smile disappeared. Thomas. Jack noticed the change in her voice. She knew him. The man got off his horse. I heard you bought this little farm. May crossed her arms. It's my farm. Thomas smiled. For now. Jack stepped forward. Who are you? The man looked at him. And you must be Jack Calloway. Jack's eyes narrowed. You know my name. Everyone knows the lonely cowboy. The words bothered Jack. But before he could respond, May spoke. Thomas, you should leave. Thomas laughed. You still haven't told him. Jack looked at May. Told me what? Silence. May looked uncomfortable. Thomas smiled. Interesting. Jack's voice became colder. What are you talking about? May looked at Jack. Jack. But before she could explain, Thomas rode away, leaving behind a question Jack couldn't ignore. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat outside his cabin staring at the darkness. May had secrets. And he hated secrets. Because his own secret had controlled his life for years. The next day, May came to his ranch. She found him repairing a saddle. You're angry. Jack didn't look up. I'm not. You are. He put the saddle down. Who was he? May took a deep breath. My husband's brother. Jack looked surprised. Your husband? May looked down. I was married. The words felt heavy. Jack said nothing. My husband passed away 2 years ago. Jack's expression softened. I didn't know. I never told many people. Why? May looked toward the fields. Because after he died, everyone treated me like I was broken. She paused. I wanted to prove I could build a life on my own. Jack understood that feeling. More than she knew. May looked at him. Now you know my secret. Jack was quiet. Then she asked, what about yours? Jack looked away. There is no secret. May smiled sadly. Everyone has one, Jack. He didn't answer. But that night, he remembered. A different time. A different woman. A promise that was never kept. Years ago, Jack had loved someone named Clara. He had planned a future with her. A home. A family. A life. But the day before their wedding, she left. She chose another man. A richer man. A man who could give her the life Jack couldn't. Jack had never recovered. He told himself he lost her because he wasn't enough. So he stopped trying. Stopped believing. Stopped loving. The next morning, May found Jack sitting near the river. She sat beside him. You look like someone carrying 1,000 storms. Jack gave a small smile. You always talk like that. Only when someone needs to hear it. He looked at her. I loved someone once. May stayed quiet. She left. Jack looked down. And I decided I'd never let anyone hurt me like that again. May's voice was soft. Jack, I built this ranch. Built this life. And I thought being alone meant I was safe. May looked at him. But safe isn't the same as happy. Jack didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew she was right. For the first time, Jack Calloway wasn't afraid of losing love. He was afraid of never finding it again. The cowboy who chose to stay. For the first time in many years, Jack Calloway had told someone the truth. Not the story people in town knew. Not the story where he was just the cold, quiet cowboy who liked being alone. He had shown May the wound he had hidden for years. And somehow, she didn't judge him. She didn't pity him. She just listened. That meant more than Jack wanted to admit. But peace never lasted long in Montana. 3 days later, Jack noticed something strange. A group of men were standing near May's fence. He immediately rode toward them. What's going on here? The men turned. At the front was Thomas Whitfield, May's late husband's brother. Thomas smiled. Just discussing business. Jack looked at the papers in his hand. What business? Thomas held them up. This land. Jack's expression changed. What about it? Thomas looked toward May's farmhouse. My brother owned this property before he died. I believe I have a right to it. Jack stepped closer. You're saying you want her farm? Thomas smiled. I'm saying she doesn't belong here. Jack's jaw tightened. She built this place. Thomas laughed. With what? Hard work and dreams. He looked around. This world doesn't belong to people like her. Jack moved closer. Careful. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Are you threatening me, Calloway? Jack stared at him. No. A pause. I'm warning you. Thomas smiled. I always wondered why a man like you lived alone. He looked at May's house. Maybe because nobody ever stayed. Those words were meant to hurt. And they did. But this time, Jack didn't walk away. Because this wasn't about him. It was about May. When Thomas left, Jack rode straight to May's house. She was standing outside. She already knew. He came here, didn't he? Jack nodded. He wants your land. May looked down. I knew. This day would come. You knew. My husband's family never wanted me to have this place. Why didn't you tell me? May looked at him. Because I didn't want you thinking I needed saving. Jack was quiet. Then he said, you don't. May looked surprised. You don't need someone to save you, May. He stepped closer. But everyone deserves someone standing beside them. Her eyes softened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then May whispered, you're changing, Jack. He looked away. Maybe. No. She smiled. You are. That evening, Jack gathered information about Thomas. He discovered the truth. Thomas wasn't interested in the land. He wanted to sell it. A railroad company was planning to expand through the area. May's farm sat right on the route. If Thomas took control, he would make a fortune. Jack rode to town the next morning. He met with the local judge. He checked records. He spoke to people who knew the Whitfield family. And by sunset, he had proof. Thomas had no legal claim. When Jack returned to May's ranch, she was waiting. You spent the whole day helping me. Jack looked at her. Yes. Why? Jack didn't answer immediately. Because the truth scared him. Finally, he said, because I couldn't stand the idea of you losing the place you worked so hard for. May looked at him. And if it wasn't the farm? Jack became quiet. She stepped closer. What if it was something else? Jack looked into her eyes. The distance between them disappeared. For a second, he forgot about the past. Forgot about fear. Forgot about all the reasons he told himself he shouldn't love again. Then, a loud noise interrupted them. A horse came running toward the ranch. The rider jumped off. Jack. It was an old friend from town. There's trouble. Jack turned. What happened? The man looked serious. Thomas found out you're helping May. Jack's face hardened. And, the man lowered his voice. He's angry. A pause. He said he knows how to hurt you. Jack looked toward May. And suddenly he understood. Thomas wasn't going after the land anymore. He was going after the one thing Jack had started caring about. May. The man who was afraid to love again. The night became colder than usual. Jack Calloway stood outside his cabin, staring into the darkness. For years, he had faced storms. He had faced wild animals. He had faced men who wanted to take what belonged to him. But this felt different. Because this time, someone was threatening May. And that scared him more than anything. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Jack. He turned. May was standing there holding a lantern. You should be sleeping. She looked at him. So should you. Jack looked away. I'm fine. May walked closer. You always say that. Because it's true. No. Her voice was gentle. You say it because you don't want anyone to worry about you. Jack stayed silent. May looked at the empty fields. When I first came here, everyone told me I wouldn't survive. She smiled slightly. They said a woman alone couldn't build anything in the West. Jack looked at her. But you did. Yes. She looked back at him. Because I learned something. What? That being alone makes you strong. She paused. But having someone beside you makes you stronger. Those words stayed with Jack. Because deep inside, he wanted someone beside him. He just didn't know how to admit it. The next morning, Jack rode into town. He found Thomas near the saloon. You have something to say to me. Thomas smiled. I was hoping you'd come. Jack stepped closer. Stay away from May. Thomas laughed. There it is. What? The reason behind the lonely cowboy finally leaving his cave. Jack's eyes narrowed. You don't know anything about me. Thomas walked closer. I know enough. He lowered his voice. You lost one woman. Before. Jack froze. Thomas smiled. And now you think you can protect another. Jack's fists tightened. Be careful. Thomas laughed. Why? Because you'll fight me. He shook his head. No, Jack. The truth is you're afraid. Jack stared at him. You're afraid to love again because someone might leave. For a moment, Jack had no answer. Because Thomas was cruel. But he was right about one thing. Jack was afraid. That evening, Jack returned to May's ranch. But this time, he didn't pretend. He told her everything. Thomas knows about Clara. May looked at him. Clara, the woman I loved. Jack looked down. I thought I could forget her. A pause. But I never did. May's expression softened. Jack, I spent years believing I wasn't enough. His voice became quieter. So I stopped letting anyone get close. May stepped closer. Until now. Jack looked at her. And for once, he didn't hide. Until you. The words were simple, but they meant everything. May looked away for a moment, trying to hold back her emotions. Jack, I don't want to be someone you choose because you're afraid of being alone. He immediately answered. That's not why. Then why? Jack looked at her. Because when I'm with you. He paused. I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore. May's eyes filled with emotion. Before she could answer, they heard something outside. A loud crash. Jack immediately grabbed his rifle and ran outside. The barn door was broken. The horses were panicked. And on the ground was a piece of paper. Jack picked it up. Only 4 words were written. Leave while you can. May stood behind him. Jack. He turned toward her. Fear crossed her face. But Jack wasn't afraid anymore. Not for himself. He folded the paper. Then looked toward the darkness. Thomas made one mistake. What? Jack looked at May. He thought I was still the man who had nothing to lose. A pause. But now, he looked at her. I have something worth fighting for. The cowboy who finally fought for love. The message was still in Jack Calloway's hand. Leave while you can. Years ago, a message like that would have made him angry. It would have made him walk away. It would have reminded him that caring about someone only brought pain. But not anymore. Because now there was May. And Jack had finally realized something. A person could survive alone. But they couldn't truly live that way forever. The next morning, Jack woke before sunrise. He prepared his horse and checked his weapons. May watched from the doorway. You're going after him. Jack looked at her. Yes. Jack. He stopped. May walked closer. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Jack shook his head. You're not the reason. Then what is? He looked at her. Because for the first time in years, I care about something more than myself. May became quiet. Those words meant more than any promise. She reached for his hand. Come back. Jack looked at their hands together. A small smile appeared. I will. Then he rode toward town. Thomas was waiting near the old abandoned mill outside town. Jack knew that was where he would be. Because men like Thomas always wanted an audience. When Jack arrived, Thomas was standing beside a wagon. I knew you'd come. Jack got off his horse. You're done, Thomas. Thomas laughed. Am I? Jack pulled out the documents proving May owned the land. You have no claim. Thomas looked at the papers. Then smiled. You think paperwork stops people like me? Jack stared at him. No. He stepped closer. But justice does. Thomas laughed. Justice. He shook his head. You really believe this world works that way? Jack didn't answer. Thomas walked closer. You know what your problem is, Jack. What? You finally found something to care about. A pause. And that makes you weak. Jack looked at him. No. His voice was calm. It makes me human. For a moment, Thomas had no response. Then he signaled toward the trees. 2 men stepped out. Jack's expression changed. Thomas smiled. I didn't come here to talk. The fight started quickly. Jack was outnumbered. But he wasn't the same man anymore. Before, he fought because he had nothing to lose. Now he fought because he had something to protect. He moved with purpose. With anger. With determination. After a hard struggle, the 2 men ran away. Thomas tried to escape. But Jack caught him. Where do you think you're going? Thomas looked at him. You won't do anything. Jack stared. You're right. A pause. Because I'm not like you. He let the authorities handle Thomas. Because revenge wasn't what Jack wanted. Peace was. When Jack returned to the ranch, the sun was setting. May was waiting outside. The moment she saw him, she ran toward him. Jack. He smiled. I'm okay. She looked at the scratches on his face. You call this okay? Jack laughed softly. And May froze. Because she had never heard him laugh like that. Not a small smile. Not a hidden one. A real laugh. You're laughing. Jack looked at her. Maybe I am. May smiled. I like it. Jack looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I spent years building walls around myself. May listened. But you never tried to break them. She smiled. I didn't have to. Jack looked confused. You just showed me there was a reason to open the door. The wind moved through the fields. The same fields where Jack had once lived alone. But now, everything felt different. He looked toward the barn. Henrietta the chicken walked by. Jack pointed. Your chicken is still causing problems. May laughed. She likes you. She's a troublemaker. She's family. Jack smiled. And this time, he didn't hide it. Because he finally understood. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who made you want to become better. And May Whitfield had done that. She had walked into the life of a lonely cowboy. And reminded him how to live again. The home Jack never thought he would have final part. 1 year later, the Calloway Ranch looked completely different. The same old wooden fences still stood. The same golden fields stretched across the land. The same mountains watched over the quiet valley. But something had changed. The ranch was no longer empty. There was laughter. There was music. There was a feeling of home. Jack Calloway stood outside the barn watching the sunset. The old cowboy who once believed he would spend his whole life alone. was now the happiest man in Montana. Jack. He turned around. May was walking toward him. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair moving softly in the evening wind. Even after all this time, she still made his heart stop. You're staring. Jack smiled. Maybe. May laughed. You never used to admit anything. I've changed. She raised an eyebrow. Because of me. Jack walked closer. Because you showed me I was allowed to. May smiled. For years, Jack had been afraid of losing love. But now he understood something. Love wasn't a weakness. It was the strongest thing he had ever found. The town had changed its opinion about Jack. The man everyone called cold and distant was now the man everyone respected. Not because he was the strongest cowboy. Not because he owned the biggest ranch. But because people saw the difference May had made. The lonely cowboy had become the man who helped everyone. He repaired fences for neighbors. He helped young ranchers learn the trade. And every Sunday, he and May opened their home for dinner. Because May believed nobody should feel alone. Especially not someone who had once been like Jack. One evening, Jack found May sitting near the river, the same place where they had first talked about loneliness. He sat beside her. You remember this place? May smiled. Of course. You told me I wasn't broken. May looked at him. I told you that. You did. She laughed. I don't remember saying that. Jack smiled. You said I was carrying storms. May looked at the river. And now, Jack looked at her. Now I have someone to stand in the rain with. May became quiet. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. For a while, they just sat there. No words. No worries. Just peace. A few months later, the whole town gathered near the little church. Jack stood in front of everyone. The same man who once said he would never love again was now waiting for the woman who changed his life. When May walked toward him, Jack smiled. Not the small hidden smile from before. The full smile of a man who finally found where he belonged. They promised each other forever. Not because life would always be easy. Not because there would never be storms. But because they knew they would face everything together. Years passed. The ranch grew. The fields became greener. The house became filled with memories. And every morning, Jack still woke up early. But now, he didn't wake up to an empty home. He woke up to May's voice. To laughter. To love. And sometimes, to Henrietta the chicken trying to enter the house. Jack would shake his head. That chicken is still trouble. May would laugh. You love her. Jack would smile. Maybe. And May would always answer. I knew there was a heart under all that cowboy anger. Jack would look at her. The woman who came into his life unexpectedly. The woman who didn't try to change him. The woman who simply reminded him who he really was. A man who deserved love. A man who deserved happiness. A man who finally found home. Please friends spot my channel. Like, share, comment. Subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching.